Our next presenter, Rhianna, claims that she cannot live without Sephora, and also she has taught herself to cry on command.
So don't be surprised if you see a few tears.
When I first moved to Canada, the question that followed me throughout my first year was, why are you here? You see, my reasons for being here weren't the ones most immigrants would give. Better jobs, more opportunities. Mine were slightly more complicated than that. I guess I never told you where I was from. I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, as an Irish Catholic, which may not seem relevant at the moment, but I will explain why in a few seconds. When most people think of Ireland, they think of rolling green hills and leprechauns. But for me, my Ireland had a very different perspective. Ireland for me was a place of love and laughter, but also fear. The city I grew up in is a divisive place. I mean, when you're home to the most bombed hotel in the world, you kind of earn that name. See, Belfast has a complicated and long history that to give an adequate explanation of would take far longer than the time we have. So, in 20 seconds or less, I'll try and sum up 800 years of conflict. In the last 40 or so years, tensions between Irish Catholics and Protestants have reached an all-time high, resulting in a period known as the Troubles, which ranged from 1968 to 1998, when a ceasefire was negotiated and life was expected to return to normal. I know what you're all thinking. How is this relevant, Rhianna? I'll get there, I promise. See, I was born in 2000, and it was a year of many wonderful things. In my opinion, the best of which was my birth. I grew up in a lovely family with 2 wonderful parents and 2 okay siblings. I went to school, I made friends, and I pretended it was perfectly normal for a literal wall to divide my city in half. In the name of peace. That's a little ironic, right? We need peace within our city. Let's build a wall! I pretended that it was normal for parents to fear what part of town their kids wore their school uniforms on, and what part, to fear the question of which religion you were, because there is a wrong answer to that. See, the thing is, despite the terror of the Troubles largely occurring before my birth, the decisions made during that time period did affect my childhood. Even the pronunciations of certain letters and the difference between sports team preferences were the subject of many awkward conversations and bitterness. I refused to acknowledge the tension in my city until it came crashing through my doors in the form of 3 armed gunmen. Maybe it was because of how my parents told stories that sounded as though they were from folklore. I didn't believe them. This attack left my dad wounded and the rest of us traumatized. Though I made it through that night physically unscathed, I will forever remember the moments after the attack when my only thoughts were that my dad was dead. I was 10 years old. After that night, it seemed my parents couldn't get us out of Ireland fast enough. There were a couple options we considered making our new home: Australia, Norway, or Canada. Clearly Canada won out, and that brought me here, to beautiful Lloydminster. What most of you might not realize is how hard it actually is to get into Canada. For us, it was a 3-year process that cost a lot of money, a number I don't really want to think of, but it brought us here, to Lloydminster. Lloydminster is a city, while not as dynamic as Belfast, is where I call home. And despite the drivers being the worst I've ever seen, I find peace here. Light is what I'm here to talk to you about, and what that means to me. For me, Canada was my light. For my parents, Canada meant freedom and opportunity. For me, it means light, the light at the end of the tunnel. See, Canada has allowed me to escape the cycle my parents fell victim to, a cycle of fear, then recovery, then fear again. Instead of fearing whether my home was going to fall victim to an incompetent government's power plays, or partaking in the hatred the generation before me seems determined to pass on, I can worry about normal things, like how in the hell I'm going to afford university, and how many meals I can make using ramen noodles. The journey to who I am today has been a long one, and is still not complete. There is a part of me that still wishes I was in Ireland, regardless of what happened to me there. I mean, I cried myself to sleep the first few months I was here. What I struggled most with was my accent, the constant demands of say that again, or the teachers who corrected my pronunciations, not understanding that that's just how I talk. The part that wishes I was still in Ireland is young and naive. That part is the same girl who refused to believe that despite claims of peace between sides, there is still the ever-present undercurrent of sectarianism and a growing attitude of us versus them. I am fortunate enough to still be in contact with my childhood best friend, and she has been my window into the true Belfast, a city of terrified youth and divided politicians. This is a city that has left its youth scrambling to escape. A recent study has shown that for youth in Northern Ireland, a third of them will return home, or will go abroad for university, and less than a third will return home. And that's not even counting upon the thousands of families like mine who leave behind all they've known and all they've ever had in search of more. No, I'm not standing here telling you all the awful parts of Ireland because I hate the country. That's simply not true. I love Ireland, but I can also acknowledge that there is no future there for me. My future is here. Maybe not in Canada, maybe not in Lloyd, but it is in Canada. That's not to say Canada isn't flawed, but I'm in my honeymoon period. I'm sure by the time I make my first student loan payment, it might change a little bit. What I experience most, which I'm sure all immigrants have experienced, is a feeling of displacement. I don't have a home in Ireland, but I haven't found one in Canada yet. And that's been my most challenging struggle, building myself a home. And thankfully, as I've grown up, as I've made my friends, and as I've discovered who I am, that feeling has subsided. When I was working on this presentation, I asked one of my many aunts, she would say my favorite, how to end this presentation. And she gave me a quote from Mary McAleese that I'd like to share with you today. The immigrant's heart marches to the beat of two quite different drums, one from the old homeland, the other from the new. The immigrant has to bridge that gap and live comfortably in the new while bringing the best of his or her ancient identity and heritage to bear on life in the new homeland.